Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington. And today I'm joined by what I think is going to be pretty exciting and a new fun thing. I have with me Matt Clements Jr., who is actually one of my employees, I guess, co-videographer, partner in crime, kind of however you would want to phrase it. But I thought it was great to kind of get Matt on the podcast and get his his voice and his personality and kind of get his history and backstory since he's going to be working with a lot of our clients this year and kind of hopefully moving forward. So Matt, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and just a little bit about what you do.
Hey, thanks again for having me. I'm Matt Clements. I am a video editor and producer, and I just happen to do some videography on the side as well. So I've been doing weddings for about 3-4 years now, working with Reed and a couple other weddings for friends and stuff. But yeah, I've been doing videos since pretty much high school. I kind of fell in love with it. It was just something I was doing in my spare time. Ended up going to college for it, found a really good niche of people, which took me down to Los Angeles for a short stint, did a short film, and now I'm back. I'm ready to do some more production and film some weddings, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I definitely want to get into all that because I do think it's interesting to talk with someone like I went to school not for film, but for kind of like production, news, and just to kind of get that take as well as because some people kind of fall into it, and then some people choose to go to school for it. So I think that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in or coming on, I should say. We were talking off camera or off mic. The snow has seemingly kind of dampened everybody's enthusiasm. And I will tell you, wedding vendors, if you are listening to this, it is very easy to make worthwhile of your time when being stuck inside in the snow, when you can come on a remote podcast recording session and talk about your business and who you are. So Matt, thanks for coming in. So talk about kind of when you were, like you said, when you were growing up and it's something you've always wanted to do. When did that love start? Were you one of those ones that had a camcorder running around, with like Super 8, or what was going on?
In a way, I would say the actual realization that I wanted to make movies and stuff kind of came later. But I think back to I had an extra credit science project that could have just been an essay, but I decided I wanted to make like a Bill Nye inspired episode with the family camcorder. And at the time, I didn't know how to edit anything. I didn't know how to shoot anything. I was just like, oh, I've got this camera, and I'll make this cool little like Bill Nye episode. And I ended up using our VHS recorder to edit it just by like rewinding, stopping, and just getting into the right spots here and there. So that was my way. It was like kind of cutting on video essentially with a VHS recorder. But that was early on. I think that was like 4th or 5th grade. But since then, I started getting my own cameras and really teaching myself how to do things. Started with Final Cut and all that. And, you find the right people to kind of help you learn the craft. And that's, I think, really when you figure out where your place is when you find the people to work with.
Yeah, and I think I will say, and it kind of relates to that VHS story, one thing that's always struck me about you is kind of your handy kind of MacGyver, kind of being able to, in a good way, figuring out kind of how to make things work. That you came up for a wedding we did, I guess it was last summer, and we were doing a same day edit, and so I knew, okay, I need somebody that can come up that I can trust. And you were working in LA at the time, and we can get into that too. And we've been editing all day and shooting and editing and dumping all this stuff, and like we got to the reception. And the projector, the setup that they had set up to play the same day edit wasn't hooked up, and the thing wasn't working, and they didn't have the right cords, and it was on the wrong side of the room, and nothing would reach, and I was freaking out because they've paid all this money, and you've flown up from LA, and we're kind of doing all this work to get this going, and I didn't think it was going to happen. And luckily, you were there, and I do mean that you kind of helping get all that figured out, while I'm freaking out. And you said, well, no, I used to do AV, and I used to do production, and I kind of know all this stuff. So I do think that obviously that's kind of transcended even from a young age, right? Do you always kind of feel like you're able to figure things out like that?
Yeah, I've always liked tinkering with stuff. I mean, the computer that's right underneath me is I built this thing by hand, bit by bit, and I've been doing that forever. And I think that translates a lot to some of the work I've been doing too. It's also why I like to edit. I like to put pieces together. I like puzzle solving and stuff like that. So
So how did the Bill Nye self edit work out? How did that go?
well, I got some extra credit. It was maybe not my best work. I think that was literally the first video thing I've ever edited. And I'm sure the tape is somewhere at my mom's house. If I find it, I will absolutely transfer it and put it online.
Yeah, that would be awesome. It's fun nowadays, yeah, to be able to find something like that and share it. But what was it? Just wanting to kind of think outside the box? I mean, did you grow up watching movies and stuff, or where did that
Oh
love
yeah,
of kind of everything come from?
yeah. My dad always was taking me to the movie theater and seeing movies I probably shouldn't have, but it was a big deal to me. It was like it was an event to go to the movie theater and I wasn't necessarily told to go dress up, but I definitely was like, oh, I'm going to dress up because I'm going to the movie theater, and they got the big, red curtains around the screen and everything. It was a cool, extravagant event for me every time, and I've always seen it that way. And whether it's a film or a corporate project or whatever, or a wedding video too, um, I want to bring my most professional and my best appearance to it. Um, yeah.
That's awesome. I love the idea of dressing up and going to the movie. That's like people back in the '50s when they used to fly, or like when they would go flying, and they would dress up to go to the airport. I want to talk about. I mean, I was pulling up your bio on the website that I have, and it's something I don't think we've ever talked about. You were born overseas and grew up in Spokane. Can you kind of give us a little bit of your origin story of where that all came about?
Yeah, so my dad was in the Air Force. My mom was living in Izmir, Turkey, where she's from, and he was stationed over there, and that's how they met. And then about a year or two after they knew each other, I came along, and he brought both of us back to the States. We were living around Tacoma at the time. That's where my dad's side of the family is all based. And then shortly after that, we moved over to Spokane, and I've kind of just Spokane is really what I've known to be home. But I love Seattle. I moved here when I was 16, and even though I did that brief stint in LA, I was very happy to come back home to Seattle. This is my old stomping ground.
So you're probably too young. You don't have a lot of memories of being over there.
Not so much. I did visit a couple of times, reluctantly. I was kind of a rebellious kid. I didn't really want to go and see the world and stuff. Now I can't get enough of it. I just did a trip to Japan last year, and it was fantastic. But yeah, I did a couple of trips to go see my mom's side of the family, and I remember it being very pretty, very warm. But I didn't speak the language, so it was there was a lot of barriers for me to kind of reach back and figure out my family roots there.
So you're growing up so you went to school in Spokane. You went to high school over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk about then kind of like progressing then, making the decision, to go to school for film and kind of how that came about. And where did you go again? I should know all these things as your official employer, but
it's all good. I went to Central Washington University. But before that, technically I went to another college because I was doing Running Start in high school. So if Running Start's not in your area, it's you take college classes as a high school student on an actual college campus. So my junior and senior year, I was actually going to Bellevue College at the time, Bellevue Community College. They're now an accredited university. And I think for some reason, I took like a film as literature class as an elective. It's like, oh, this is cool. I get to watch movies and write about them. And I think that was when the gears started turning. It's like, oh, this is kind of a career path if I want it to be. And I'm analyzing at the time. My very first film that I had to analyze was Donnie Darko. And I was like, oh, this is weird. This is like a really cool movie. And they want me to dissect like the sound effects in the introduction scene. It's like, okay. And then from there, it's like I just started taking more and more film related classes that weren't necessarily working in that industry. I did like dogs in film as a literature class. I did film music appreciation because I'm terrible at music. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a video editing class. It was my first time actually doing anything with video, aside from the the one VHS project, VHS tape project. Um, I kind of lost my
That's
train of thought
okay.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, because like for me, my like high school didn't really offer. I always lament like my brother Scott went to Bellevue High, and they had like radio classes and like whether it was film or like production, and I went to Seattle Prep, and like we didn't have anything. Like we had like free period every day, which was like awesome for when you're in high school, and then when you go to college and you're like, wow, that would have been really cool if I could actually taken like a radio class as opposed to like hanging out on the quad for an hour and a half every day. So was that like that was exciting then that you kind of got to like tinker around with all that stuff for real? So like what were you editing on, and what was that kind of like in that experience of being able to do that?
I never got to edit actual film, so I dove straight into digital editing in Final Cut 7, actually 6 at the time, on just Macs. And I actually was required to kind of learn some videography in the process. I didn't necessarily need to go buy my own camera, but I felt the need to. I had to have my own MacBook for editing at home, and I had to have my own camera so I could film whatever I wanted to. All of these things could have been checked out from the college, but I was stubborn, and I wanted to do it my own way and not have any limitations.
I remember the same thing, trying to justify. I had I guess it was like a gaming PC laptop that I could edit on and take home. Yeah, even though like I easily could have edited like at the computer lab and stuff, but the idea of kind of being able to work from home and do, we were doing like short films and stuff. We did like a TV show. That's a story for another day.
I would love to see that.
Well, actually, so it was called The God Couple. It was a spinoff of The Odd Couple, and it was because we were at Gonzaga. It was a Jesuit university. It was what was it? It was the son of the devil, and it was an angel, and they were roommates at Gonzaga University. And it was actually really funny. It was kind of like a sitcom, but we blew up one of the dorms with like CGI. Like we could buy, like you could go online and buy like the fire effects for like $29 and like overlay it over. And so we fake blew up one of the dorms for one of the episodes, like because everyone had like superpowers and stuff. And we actually got heat from the dean because they found out that we were like, they thought like we were threatening. I mean, we were not doing anything, but it ended up getting like a huge amount of eyeballs on our college like the program, because it would air like every week we would do like a weekly show. And I remember Dan, my professor, being like, because I think I was directing the show as well, and he was like, there are more eyeballs on this program today than there's ever been in the last like 3 years of this thing, because they wanted to make sure that we weren't like crazy here. Anyway, that was a long tangent. So talk about more about you here doing the editing in college, and then kind of like what ended up being, I guess, your degree from that, or what was your kind of focused field of studies from that?
So I was in the communications department at Central Washington University, and I got my bachelor's of arts in film and video studies with a production specialization. So a lot of that, it wasn't necessarily just video editing. It was a lot of, there was about 6 or 7 of us that were like a really tight-knit group, and we would pass hats around depending on, every single time we do a class project, I would direct, and then the next one I would shoot it. Next one I would record the audio, and so we all kind of got experience in every department throughout the program. I felt I was gravitating towards editing. I also really thought that I was going to be a director at one point, but it's a lot to handle a group of 10 people on a crew, plus actors, and then you get up to like a 50-person crew and then a 100-person crew, and it's crazy. Whereas video editing, it's just me and a computer, and I have the footage. I know what I want to do with it. I've got notes from producers and directors, and I can help kind of get those into the final product, and it's a much more intimate process, I think. And I enjoy kind of being able to be the person that puts it all together and takes the torch across the finish line.
That's a great way of putting it. Taking the torch across the finish line. I like that. I do like too. It sounds like you kind of had a similar as I did, where doing like you said, 1 week you're shooting, and 1 week you're editing, and 1 week you're doing audio, because it lets you kind of see that whole picture, which is really important for me. Is like someone that sends you out to get footage for me to edit, and having someone that knows both sides. I can't tell you how many guys I worked with, when I was in news, who had been shooting video for like, 20, 25 years and did not know how to edit like on the new anything. Maybe they had done like some tape to tape, before they made the transition or whatever, but like they didn't know how to edit. And so, when you go out and shoot, if you don't know what that process looks like, it really dictates, how you're shooting or what you're doing or not, because you don't know what that person back at the station or back at, the studio or like you're editing, you don't know kind of what you're looking at compared to someone that's done both sides. And you're like, oh yeah, well, I know how I want my footage to look and to, be 10 seconds long and have 2 seconds of pad on each side or whatever to edit. Like, I think it's incredibly important. That it's funny to me like how many guys like don't edit their own stuff, and so it's crazy. Like, you just don't see the whole picture that way. Do you have any thoughts on that statement?
No, absolutely. I mean, I cannot tell you the number of times people have told me like, oh, make those blues pop or make those greens pop. It's like, well, you didn't really capture it in a way that I can do that. Or, they would want me to reframe the shot in post. And it's like, I'll do it if that's what you want me to do. But really, at that point, I'm then stepping on the cinematographer's skills. So it's, you really want to capture it correctly the first time. And from my perspective, I just have to acknowledge, like, if it was shot a certain way, and in my world of like scripted television shows, movies, or whatever, if it was shot a certain way for multiple takes, that's the way they wanted it, and I have to respect that. But also knowing like coverage, and that's something that directors really need to acknowledge is when you're going out there with a shot list in mind, you need to know what kind of angles you're going to be showing this from in post. You can't just do a single shot for the whole thing. Same thing applies to weddings. If we just film the ceremony with a single camera, it's going to be a pretty boring 30-minute ceremony of just one angle. So you got to get those detail shots of the rings and the bouquets and happy faces in the crowd that you can kind of cut around the room as if you were just standing in the center of the room during that moment, and you're just kind of looking around and you're just noticing nice little moments as the ceremony's happening. So it's, from my perspective as an editor, I know when I'm on the floor with the camera that I can't just be looking at one thing. I've got to be looking all over the place for good moments.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. It's funny too, just as we talk about this, I saw this morning that the Academy Awards this year, in an effort to kind of shorten the ceremony, I don't know if you've even seen this yet, they're going to air a bunch of the awards during like commercial breaks in order to like speed up the process. And so it was like cinematography, film editing, I think it's like short action, and then hair and makeup. They've all deemed were worthy of only airing during the commercial break, which is awesome because, that working in, let alone the cinematographer and the editor that was going through and like you said, if there's multiple takes and like clearing up, which is the best one and which way looks the best and which way doesn't. I mean, the film editor has incredible power, with all that stuff, right?
I think we need to give more recognition to our camera operators, to our cinematographers and DPs and our sound guys even, especially hair and makeup, and our editors too. I think there's a lot of faces that just kind of go unrecognized in this industry, whether it's scripted, corporate, wedding, commercial. Those guys are doing a lot of hard work. Guys and gals are doing a lot of hard work. I hope that the award ceremonies maybe revert for next year and look to give them a little bit more time in the spotlight.
Yeah, I just thought that was funny because it was one of those things I think like a lot of people just, you just glance over and you're like, oh, whatever. But, you're not, because like obviously like the screenwriter still gets to, accept an award and the director, but not the, the cinematographer that's like actually capturing everything. It's, that's funny. So when you're so back to, your origin story, kind of getting out of Central Washington, and then what was the next step from that, and where were you looking to go?
From there, I came back to Seattle just because that was kind of home base for me. And I was really just trying to figure out where I could fit in and edit. And that took some time. It's actually pretty difficult to find like a studio position in the Seattle area. Most people that are doing this for a living are doing it freelance. They're working from home. They're doing the gig economy route. So that's actually when I took a brief stint into the AV world and setting up screens and projectors and lavalier mics and stuff for corporate events and speeches and whatnot. And then I just kind of got lucky. I got an opportunity to edit videos for an online school. And one of those schools happened to be based in Los Angeles, not too far from the airport. And so I flew down there a couple times and hung out with them. And then I kind of just decided, it's like, well, if I've got this position, maybe I should get down there and see what else I can get. It's pretty cutthroat. If you're not pushing it every day and trying to find more work, then chances are you're probably not going to make it. But and that's kind of what ended up happening is I got to the end of the road and I didn't have another gig lined up. So, I heard you were looking for a primary videographer again. It's like, you know what? I do kind of miss Washington. This heat is getting a little bit overbearing. The traffic is kind of nuts. So my girlfriend and I, we packed up and we came home.
I'll tell you, it's tough. And even, when I was in news in Bakersfield and, trying to find anything in Seattle and, emailing and I think you could, count on two hands, like the number of like studios in town. I mean, I know like LA's got more, but it is tough. And I got to the point where I was just like you said, you just kind of freelance it yourself, because if you can't find something that kind of fits your mold or what you kind of got to make the mold, talk about doing that in LA and working on that. Was that, and obviously a very different environment than Seattle, like you said, a lot more cutthroat, but did you learn some lessons down there? Were there some good takeaways that you had?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Budget things out well in advance. I know you think your project is going to be manageable in a weekend. There will be some hidden costs you're not expecting. No matter what the position, always make sure you're paying them. I did a couple of like short film projects and stuff, and they'd toss like $100 here and there, and it's like, oh, that's nice of you, but LA is really expensive, and we're working really hard, and we went to school for this and all that. So I think one of the things that people always overlook in LA is budget for sure. And kind of along the same lines, I'm starting to see people hiring what they're calling junior video editors instead of interns, and they're paying well below like union rates, and I think the union is super important. LA does have a really good community. You are absolutely going to run into someone that you can collaborate down there. So it was rough, and I certainly had some issues with just the traffic and overgrowth of the city, but pretty much everyone I talked to was working on something. They were directing something. They were writing something. They wanted to start shooting maybe. So the nice thing about LA is you're going to find a place to be, so long as you go into it prepared to, it's going to be tough. So.
Yeah, I tell you, when I was in news up here, and my buddy Paul, he had taken the job at KTLA down in LA, and I just thought, man, it's just a totally different world. I mean, I know Seattle, and they talk about photographers and video and weddings and all sorts of different, saturation up here, and it's like you go to LA and it's like you times that by 100. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of. But like you said, then there is a lot of I think creative energy, and if maybe if you are somebody looking for a variety of different things, but like you said, they're not all going to pay or pay equitably as well.
What I did like about talking to folks down there is nobody's from LA. So you'd always start your conversation of like, oh, where'd you come from? So everybody's very like social and happy to talk about where they came from and where they plan on going.
Yeah. So you move back up here and you're kind of, besides working for us and, you're taking some other freelance stuff. I know that you're working on a cool documentary, kind of editing the trailer. Talk about some things you're working on right now and maybe something you're especially proud of and kind of why.
Sure. Right now, I am doing the final touches on a short film called Little Treasures. I don't know how much I can spoil. Well, I won't spoil anything. I'll just say it's a story about a couple of dimwits that are trying to rob a house and things go horribly wrong. So, actually, the trailer is up on my website, outlier.media. And yeah, you can check that out up there. We will probably be doing some Kickstarter funding of some sort in the near future to kind of get the finishing touches done. Other than that, I'm also editing a trailer for a documentary about the families that have lost loved ones in 9/11. The 20th anniversary is coming up, so it's kind of focusing on not necessarily the event, but how they are coping with the loss almost 20 years later. And we're going to start editing the feature-length version of that film pretty soon, actually, in about a month or so.
Yeah, and what's that been like? Because obviously, like and we talked about this the other day too. That the woman that's kind of directing this, right? I guess has been going out, with the cinematographer to kind of capture a lot of it. But you still have to kind of go through and experience all this stuff yourself, right? I mean, what's that process been like? Kind of hearing these stories and going through that.
It's tough. There's you're looking for really important moments of the story, but you're reliving those moments with them, and they're painful memories for some of these folks that are just the one of the main characters in the not character but individuals in the film, they lost their husband that they were just married to like 3 months prior. And they've remarried and they've had kids and they moved on, but it's still a major piece of their life. And that's what we're trying to show is that nobody's forgotten what happened. So they've just had to evolve and figure out how to live with those memories. And I think I think at the core of the story is that everyone in New York who was alive at the time, and not even alive at the time. We still have kids who are growing up and learning that their parents were lost in this tragic event. Everyone in New York has this story of some kind, and it varies from house to house. But there's a lot of material that I have to go through, weeks of footage. The producer and director actually has been doing audio recordings since a month after the event. So I have a box full of audio CDs from the last 18 years. There's a lot of material. As an editor, that's a little daunting. And it definitely requires a certain mindset to be able to organize all that. I think one of the signs of a good editor is what their organization system is. Just being able to bin everything correctly, have everything properly dated, everything properly like scened out, kind of. I think the biggest hurdle of that is just the sheer amount of time it takes to watch and listen to weeks of content.
No, I think I have a lot of respect for editors, and especially someone like you, like that meticulousness where I'm kind of like go, go, go. I like kind of editing, my own stuff, or at least the weddings that we shoot. It's at least it kind of follows a, somewhat of a formula, a little bit you can kind of go through. Cause like, I could imagine having to like wade through all that and like you said, the attention to detail and kind of being able to like, okay, wait now where is this going to go and who said this and who said that and kind of, I mean, it's got to be daunting, right?
Oh, absolutely. If you were to look at my string outs, I'll put an entire interview on a timeline. There's probably like 100 markers on my timeline of just like, ooh, that's a good bit, that's a good bit, and I think actually these moments need to be swapped in time, and it's a lot of notating and just kind of storing things up in your head, but also giving yourself a physical backup of notes. And yeah, it's just really key to have good organizational skills as an editor.
Yeah, and especially like for documentaries, like my buddy just did one, and it took him like 18 months, and he shot everything himself. And so obviously like he, at least you kind of have firsthand and you're there, kind of knowing, but especially like you, where you got to go through these 18 years of like stuff and plus all the interviews all over the country over the last 20 years. I mean, it's crazy. I think it's going to be a cool project when it's done. I'm definitely excited to see it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting it out there. I think people are going to find that this is not just like another 9/11 documentary. I think this has a unique approach with the families involved.
So to transition a little bit more to, a little more uplifting, talk a little bit more about kind of like shooting on site. What do you like about that? And especially kind of like weddings and kind of like your role in the day with that and kind of how I would assume you enjoy it, but kind of why you enjoy it.
I think the aspect I love most about shooting on a wedding is getting that moment and nobody knows that I got it. I like to be that, like, I always tell clients, like, hey, I'm just going to be a fly on the wall. You're not even going to notice me there. And I like just being kind of in the corner, and I know, like, oh, that's going to be the moment that when they watch this video, they're going to their mouth is going to drop. It's the detail shots. It's the smiles in the crowd. It's, someone telling a joke to someone else next to them at a dinner table. It's those little moments that nobody else is really seeing happen as it's happening, but then I get to capture it and I get to remind them later.
And then do you enjoy the actual, like, are you happy kind of like doing that any sort of filming, or is it something more about like weddings? Do you kind of get caught up in all that emotion? I mean, I know you're dating, like, are you kind of a romantic at heart, or are you more like,
oh yeah,
talk about that.
Yeah. I've been dating my girlfriend here for, let's see, we're at 12 or 13 months now. No, sorry. We're at like 13, 14 months.
You should know that.
Let me back that up. Let me do the math properly here. I do consider myself to be a bit of a romantic. I do get caught up in some of the romantic moments of, the wedding videography. I've been dating my girlfriend for about a year and a half now. And we're just a couple of nerds, and we do everything together now. We just went to Japan back in October for our 1-year anniversary and had a blast there. Spent 2 weeks just kind of seeing all the culture together. And I mean, every wedding has its moments that are similar to other weddings, but I think every wedding is also incredibly unique in that the focal point is always, they're always going to have these different qualities and quirks to them that is really important for me to find and figure out in the moment. These two people that are getting married, they've known each other for years, and even before they were dating, they probably knew each other as friends or childhood friends or whatever. It depends from relationship to relationship. But I got to find it in the moment. I got to figure it out on that day how this couple is entangled with each other. And that it may not be incredibly apparent to even them how they interact with each other, because it's just day to day. I can't tell you specifically how my girlfriend and I are joined at the hip. I just know that if she's gone for more than 2 hours, I start to get a little cranky. So yeah, I think I do consider myself to be a little bit of a hopeless romantic, and I like to find those kind of mushy shots, but they're important moments to remember and look back on when you're looking at your wedding video in 5-10 years.
Yeah, I think it's funny, like you said, because they don't necessarily know, how they. Well, I mean, some couples just have like rock star chemistry, and it's nothing that you can do or not do. And some couples are madly in love, and it's just a little more quiet, and then some are madly in love, and it's a little more loud. And like you said, it really is like you got to walk in and like we'll email or do a Skype call or like an in-person meeting, and then you got to figure that out, like you said, within about 30 seconds of walking in the door and kind of who's what and what's going on. And it is daunting, but it's also I think, is it exciting? Do you enjoy that?
Absolutely. I think the first looks is always the moment that you figure it out. Because before then, you have that Skype meeting, and it's kind of hard to figure things out over that because everybody's looking at different documents and stuff on their screen. They're not necessarily looking at each other eye to eye. And then after that, you don't see the bride and groom together until that first look. If they're doing the first look with the videographer. In my experience, I've filmed every first look at every wedding I've been to, but that's always the moment where it's like, oh, now I finally get to see these two just be together and not be worried about, how much is this wedding going to cost and how many guests are we going to have and how many different meal choices do we need to offer and all that. It's like, no, it's just these two people love each other very much and they get to just spend this time together.
Yeah, and like you said, it's kind of getting. I always say I like doing the first look and kind of getting that time with them, where a lot of the day, and obviously I get that doing the first look during the ceremony too, but kind of getting to see that couple as a unit kind of throughout the day as opposed to like segmented until the reception. I think it's nice, and it just. Just as someone that generally enjoys being around, couples and hanging out, it is kind of fun as opposed to like that. There's a little bit of excitement, like running back and forth, like, okay, what's she doing? Okay, what's he doing? You're kind of running. But then at some point it is kind of nice to get everybody together and just kind of like rock and roll through stuff. What's your favorite part of the wedding day? I know you talked about the first look. Is it that, or is it, the food or the dancing or the music, or what do you like about it?
I think post-ceremony is when everyone completely opens up. It's, the boulder is released off of the couple's shoulder because now it's like, okay, it's done. Now we're going to go eat. We're going to go party. We're going to have fun. We're going to dance. That's when you see everybody's at their, they're at ease. Everybody's like ready to go and just have a good time for the rest of the night. And there's really nothing else to worry about. You've got the rest of your lives together now. You've officially tied the knot. You put the rings on. You're good to go.
Do you have any, like, I was just trying to think about, like, generally during that time too, you have a lot of like family members and stuff bugging, but like, do you have any funny stories or any like happy memories from some of the weddings you've been a part of? Like something that probably puts you on the spot, but anything that kind of stands out?
There are so many moments that I've had someone turn to the camera and say, "Hey, don't record this." Because you get in that room and they forget, like, oh, there's a camera here. We got to be like our cleaned up selves, and there's a lot of moments, but I won't necessarily put any past couples on the spot. I've been hanging out in bridal parties and groomsmen, and they have fun. It's a full 24 hours that they're just kind of having a party. It's a good time.
Yeah, it is kind of, it's a weird experience where like every time you show up, yeah, like these people are like, not on vacation, but you're kind of like in this constant, especially like during the summer when you're like constantly hanging out and like people are like day drinking and, eating all day and hanging out and lounging. And you're kind of like, wow, like this would be really easy to just kind of like get caught, but then you got to go back to work. Yeah. You're just kind of in this like constant state of like, it's weird. I don't know. It's weird to be like, to do like, 2 weddings back to back or 3 weddings or whatever. Like, it's really weird to kind of like just be in that constant state for like, extended periods of time. Talk about kind of when you're not filming and you're not editing, your girlfriend. Tell me about this trip back to Japan. What was that about? It sounds exciting.
So, yeah, I mean, we work because we are absolute nerds and we share all of the same nerdy likes. So, we're big gamers. We like our anime and our manga. We're just a bunch of dweebs. So yeah, when we went to Japan, we went to the electric town, Akihabara, and we saw all the sights and sounds there. And we went to a couple different neighborhoods as well, Shinjuku and Harajuku, and I don't know, it's something that we really click on, is just the things that we're interested in. I don't think I've named a movie or show that she doesn't like. I've certainly named a lot of movies that she's never seen, but that just comes from being a film student. You watch a lot of movies. But yeah, I mean, we met at a video game convention, so naturally that's kind of one of our cornerstones. We at one point had two TVs in our bedroom, and we played video games side by side. Um, she is currently reading a manga that is taking forever because it's over like 2,000 pages, and as soon as she's done, she's going to pass it off to me. Um, so, all the things that we enjoy, we kind of go out of our way to enjoy together, whether we can do that simultaneously or not. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
That's perfect. And what is it about kind of those things and, like anime and all that? Like, what is it that draws it to you? Is it that history of like, studying film and different art forms? Is it like the creativity? Is it what kind of is it about video games and those sort of things that kind of draw your attention?
I think what got my attention in like manga is that it's kind of like reading a storyboard. And I get to, and graphic novels too. We're big DC Comics fans. We like our Marvel, but we're a DC household. Comics and manga to me is like reading a storyboard, and I get to kind of visualize the action as it's happening, and kind of figure out how would I shoot this, how would I edit this, how would I, what sort of sound effects would I add, and all that sort of thing. With video games, I think is such a rich medium to be able to tell stories and allow the person who is ingesting that content to have their own presence in the world. Whether you're controlling another character who has their own name and has their own dialogue, or if you are creating a character from the start, doesn't ever speak, maybe you never see their face, that person completely represents you in that world. Either way, I think it's much more engrossing than a feature film, because you are physically putting yourself there, or you're mentally putting yourself there. And then with virtual reality games coming in, it kind of blurs that line of like, am I actually in this world, or am I just feeling that I'm there? So I think that's what I really like about gaming, is that I can kind of disappear to another world. Whereas when I'm watching a movie, don't get me wrong, I love movies, but my phone rings and I have to check that, or I get a text notice or whatever, and I have to pause the movie, and it's much harder for me to break out of the trance of gaming.
Well, also the thing too, and I mean, I think when you're house sitting for us, and when you came over and saw, we have an Xbox, and I said I haven't played it in a long time since kind of I started the business, but I did used to be a pretty big gamer, and when you put like 30, 40, 50 hours into like anything, let alone like an immersive like Grand Theft Auto or whatever, and then versus like, oh, I watched this movie for 90 minutes or whatever. I mean, it is like it just grips you more and more. And maybe that to kind of cornerly bring this back to like weddings and stuff. I mean, there is a lot of time invested in that, and so the more time and energy in like a video game, like the payoff is going to be a lot better, and like you're just going to feel those emotional kind of notes a lot more, right?
Yeah, you feel more ownership, I'd say.
Yeah,
I think the more time commitment, the more you feel like, oh, this is mine. This is my story that I get to enjoy, and I can show it to others. But at the end of the day, there's that little bit in your head that's like, no, this is my little bit. And that's true to an extent. Everybody plays games differently, so everybody's going to have a slightly different experience and slightly different stories to tell. And it's not as heartfelt as certain stories in films, but you hear people playing, Fortnite is a big thing right now, and they're always telling like, oh, I got this cool story of my squad dropping on these people and blah blah blah. Right now all these different games are coming out. Apex Legends is kind of taking Fortnite for a run, and but at the end of the day, it's about creating your own story and your own moments to share with other people.
There you go. Moving forward now, professionally, personally, besides, obviously filming like, buku weddings for, best made videos and things, like how else, now that you're back in Seattle, like how else do you want to grow kind of professionally, and where do you want to see yourself in the next couple of years?
I want to finish the short film that I'm working on, and then I actually do have another script that I'm ready to go on. I just got to get funding locked down and find a solid crew to work with, and I think Seattle is probably the only city that I really could have done this script. I've been writing it since my first year of college. And I think it's finally ready to come out. But yeah, I'd like to get my company up and running, Outlier Media, as something that is doing kind of gaming related content. I want to do gaming videos with my girlfriend and friends. And I would really love to continue doing short films, short narrative films.
So you're writing this one. Do you enjoy writing as well? Or is it more of a struggle?
It's more of a struggle for me. I get really bogged down in the writing process. I know the story I want to tell, but in terms of getting the words on the paper, it's a lot more difficult for me. And typically I'll hit like 1 week where I'm just like flying through pages, and then the next week it's just like, oh, I can't even write a paragraph. It's just it'll get bogged down at times like that. I definitely have a lot of respect for screenwriters.
Oh, I can't hardly write content for the website,
Yeah.
let alone
People that write 3 or 4 feature films a year, that just drives me like I can't even imagine.
Well, no, but it does seem like you have a lot of good outlets for your creativity, and as somebody that obviously has a lot of different juices flowing, I think it's kind of fascinating just to hear a little bit about each of these things and kind of keeping your mind sharp and kind of your talents kind of tuned in, right?
Yeah, I think it's super important to figure out, what sort of creative output do you have, and where can you put it. And I think I've got plenty of things to work on. I can do graphic design, I can do editing, I can pull out my camera and shoot a little thing if I want to. And, even gaming to an extent has some areas where you can create. Dreams on the PS4 is an interesting one right now, where you can straight up just make a game if you wanted to. With a controller. You don't need to know how to code or anything like that. Oh God, at one point I wanted to be a computer programmer, and that is not a field that I can excel in.
No. They say though that that's like the new thing they're trying to get everybody into, right? Is like computer programming before the robots figure out how to do it and take all our jobs.
I really am maybe stubborn in it, but I hope that automation is not something that we have to fear in filmmaking and in video making.
I would hope so. I've seen like the GoPro will like supposedly edit your footage now, and by finding like the highlights, and it's always a little interesting. I don't think it'll ever have that.
I stand firm that a robot will never know how to feel like a human though. So long as a robot does not know how to feel, then I still have a role in this industry.
That's awesome. Last thing before we go, if there was one thing you wish future clients of yours and mine and ours and everybody else knew about you, what would that be? And that's a huge put you on the spot.
I may be quiet, but I'm always present. I'm always thinking about what my next step is, and I'm trying to figure out how to fix other people's problems in the moment. If you come to me with a problem, I'm going to come back at you with a solution. I would say that I'm a fairly open book. If you want to talk to me about anything with your video, anything about your project, I'll listen and I'll kind of digest that and analyze it, and then I'll figure out something to give back to you. Even if it seems like I'm a little bit closed off, I'm a little bit more open than that.
That's awesome. And I will say, as a problem solver, and probably the reason why you got this job is when we had a wedding last year, and there was some transportation issues with getting one of the videographers back. The wedding was in Vancouver, and getting back from Vancouver to Seattle, and we're in LA and coming up, and you said, well, I guess I could sleep at the train station, or, well, could I change my flight to Portland because we're going to be in Vancouver? Could I leave the wedding, on time, be done with the wedding and make it to the flight? Or, there was quite a bit of... so
we made it happen too.
Yes. And so I very much appreciated that. And like you said, your willingness to problem solve and figure things out. And it goes a long way. And I think the clients for years will appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, this has been such a fun talk. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, A, just for me to kind of hear more about your story, and B, for everybody to kind of hear more about it. Obviously, if people want to know more about you, A, they could go to our website, bestmadevideos.com. But if people wanted to learn more kind of about your short films and all your other creative endeavors, where would you have them check out?
They can go out to outlier.media. I post trailers and blog posts and stuff on current projects out there. I'm also on Twitter at Matt Clements Jr. Junior's JR. I don't always filter myself on there, so I try. But yeah, I post a lot of what I'm working on out there, as well as just a lot of stuff I'm enjoying in my personal life.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thank you so much.